So I'm going to go ahead and get us started today because I know we have a lot of exciting content to cover. Thank you all so much for joining us for our last professional development webinar of National AI Literacy Day 2026. We are so thankful to you for giving us your time today to learn about AI literacy and join our guest presenter for today. So before we get started, just a moment to thank our partners here, EdSafe AI. I am the project manager for EdSafe, so one of the steering committee members. And then we are also joined by aiEDU today. And we would be remiss to not mention the Tech Interactive and Common Sense Media. All four of our organizations have been working very hard to plan today's events. And alongside our steering committee, we also want to extend a sincere thank you to our corporate sponsors. Today would not be possible without their support. We hope you've had a chance to join us for our other webinars that we've had earlier today. If not, they will all be posted to the EdSafe YouTube channel. We have a playlist for National AI Literacy Day, so you will be able to watch those. We'll also post them to our website. But I won't take up any more of our time here today. I am so grateful to introduce this session, What AI Changes and What It Doesn't, a framework for educators. So without further ado, I will pass it on over.
Amazing. Thank you so much. Hi, everybody. My name is Kushali Narachanya. I'm with aiEDU, and I'm really excited to get the next 42 minutes with you all, closing out this beautiful Friday for AI Literacy Day. I'm going to go ahead and start sharing my screen. And I know you all got to introduce where you were from. I would love for you to also put into chat now a response to this bottom question here, which is what's one industry other than education where you think AI is making a big impact to just kind of get us started to think about what's changing and what's not with AI. So go ahead and add that into chat as we continue to get started here. Yes. Okay. Wonderful. The digital media, Ben, Kimberly, the self-driving cars, Kevin, home improvement. I'm so curious about that. Yes. Kate, medicine. My dad's a physician, and he's been talking about all of this amazing kind of development in cancer research. Emily, all of them, amazing. Great. And so I want us to keep this in mind because what we are anchoring in today is thinking about exactly this. What is changing in industry? And then what does that mean for us in classrooms? And taking the lens of the teacher and how we can kind of address this in our classrooms as well. And so this again is this idea of thinking about what is changing and what's not, and how we can apply that to our content. I did say my name. I'll say it again. It's Kashali Narachanya. I'm so excited to be here. I am the Director of Learning at aiEDU, where I get to oversee all of our curriculum and professional learning development. I'm a high school math teacher at heart. That is how I started my career, and have been doing professional learning or adult learning for the better half of my career, and I have been with aiEDU for about 2 years, really bringing to the forefront how do we think about effective learning for adults and students in this new space, which brings me to our mission at aiEDU, which is really thinking about what's it going to take for students to thrive in a world where AI is everywhere. And so we don't talk very much actually about how to use AI tools effectively, though that is a part of it, but thinking about everything else that goes into making people feel successful in the world that we're entering into as well. So in today's 40 minutes, we're going to talk a little bit about what this framework is that is described in a report that we put out with the Burning Glass Institute titled What Skills Matter Now. And there is a four-quadrant kind of strategy that you can apply to skills in the classroom that we lifted up through kind of a comparative analysis in what is listed in job listings as well. And so we're going to look at that from the lens of like, what does that mean for instructional approaches for content, and what can it mean for assessment as well? So those are the two things that we're hoping that you walk away with here. And don't worry, there will be a not one pager because it didn't fit in one page, but a PDF that you can walk away with that has all this content kind of summarized in ways that you can think about applying. One thing I'd like to do, and I understand this is like framework on top of framework. I do want to name that at aiEDU, we have spent a lot of time thinking about what it means to define AI readiness. And we've done that through our AI readiness framework. And in that, we have situated some student competencies for what it would mean to be AI ready for students from K through 12 across these domains of knowing the basic, being a critical thinker, and leading with the human advantage. And then around that, our educator competencies, thinking about what do we need to know as adults in these spaces with students to be able to support them on that. And for schools and districts to think about what does it take to kind of make a system work in this way. These are meant to work alongside kind of district priorities and instructional goals, but a way for us to think about what does AI ready mean. And this framework was actually built and revised upon based on the research we did with Burning Glass Institute. So I just wanted to share that and put that out there. That is something that we have made, and it is anchored in the research that I'm going to dive into a little bit deeper here. And that is this report that we have kind of put together with the Burning Glass Institute, and you can see that in chat now too. And the real what was kind of driving us behind this is we are seeing, AI can write some essays, it can solve some equations, it's synthesizing research now across hundreds of studies. Like these are things that are happening now. And back in 2022, 23, we were just kind of starting to see what was possible with it. And so now that we are here and seeing kind of the capabilities of what this technology is and knowing that those capabilities keep expanding, what does it mean for what we should be teaching? And that's really where we approach this question from together with Burning Glass Institute. And so we wanted to kind of think about how is AI kind of reshaping the skills of professions. So what are we seeing in job descriptions that is changing as a result of AI? And then can we map that back to the content skills that we are teaching at the K-12 level? And so this is the report then. This is a joint report between aiEDU and Burning Glass Institute, where we actually did this analysis across job listings and skills, content skills. And we're going to kind of walk through what this means and what we found as a result of this study. And you're going to leave with this educator guide to kind of apply it in your space. So what I'm going to lead with first is actually what we found as a result of this research. Again, mapping what we are seeing in job descriptions against the skills and kind of content skills that we're trying to teach in K-12. And there are three big headlines that came out of this is first and foremost, the cognitive bar is rising, not falling. And I think there's been a lot of talk of, well, AI can do all this stuff, which means everyone's going to stop learning how to write and everyone's going to not need to know certain skills. And what our research actually showed us is that when AI is handling execution, we actually need deeper knowledge to be able to appropriately use the tools in the ways that we need to. And so we actually need to raise what we're asking ourselves and students to be able to do and manage, not lower it, right? And then the second big headline is, there's not actually a competition across subjects. We're not saying ELA is more important than math, is more important than computer science. It's actually within subjects thinking about what changes and shifts we need to make, right? So there is foundational knowledge across all content areas that needs to happen still. But what we're doing within content areas may need to shift a bit. And then the third big thing related to this idea of assessment is that with generative AI in place, these ideas of end products, an essay, a project, like that being the thing that you assess isn't going to be sufficient anymore for everything that we're trying to do. We actually need to be looking more at kind of the process that we use to get to a final product along with the final product. So these are the big things that we are like thinking about as we lifted up kind of this data. Would love for you to put into chat which of these three things kind of resonates most with you, and that you're excited to kind of think more deeply about in our time together. You can just put 1, 2, or 3 into chat. Yes, I said like the assessment piece is a big one, right? I think that's a really important one. I'm seeing so many threes come through. And then thinking about what does it mean to raise the cognitive bar? Tiana, I love that one, but all of them, yes. So we're going to talk about all of these, and I just want you to have these kind of these three ideas in mind as we go through this as well. And so with that, would love for us to do one more kind of pulse check in this poll. So we talked, like you named which of these three key ideas you're most interested in. Would love for you to think about what is most pressing in your classroom right now. Students are using AI and I can't tell. I'm not sure which skills to prioritize given what AI can do. And I want to use AI, but I don't know how to structure it well. So go ahead and select your choice here. We'll take another 10 seconds, and then Michelle, I'll have you kind of share out what we see here. Okay, great. So we have these results in here. And I think the vast majority of us are actually putting in, I'm not sure which skills to prioritize given what AI can do now. And this four quadrant framework we're going to talk about is actually helping to do that. And tell us what to do. And many of you were talking about assessment not feeling reliable as well. And so we're going to address that as well. So again, I just want to situate just in the big ideas that have come out of this report and what you are kind of most grappling with in your classroom as we move forward. So what did we come up with in this kind of skills analysis across job descriptions and what we're teaching in K-12? The big thing that we walked away with as we were looking at this information is that every skill that we are teaching can be evaluated across two dimensions when we think about it in terms of what AI's impact is. And this is kind of what generates this quadrant framework that we're going to work from. So on the left box, what we see is the automation potential, right? And so for any given skill, we ask the question, how well can AI do this independently, right? With little human oversight. There are some things that, like grammar checking, can probably happen pretty well without a lot of human oversight. And then other things like ethical reasoning that we would not want. That is not a skill that we would want to be automated. And then on the right box, we see the augmentation potential. And so again, thinking about the skills we are trying to teach students for how much AI can enhance what humans do for this, right? And so thinking about like data analysis, that's something that AI can actually augment significantly for humans. Um, Active listening, probably not. AI could help you transcribe things, but it's not going to make you a better listener necessarily. That is a uniquely human skill that AI is not augmenting very much, right? And so it is the intersection of these two questions that we can then put all of our skills across these quadrants. And each of these quadrants then requires kind of thinking about instructional strategies in a particular way as well. And so what I'd love to do is ask you all before we kind of show the quadrants in this. I want you to think about a skill you teach that AI can now do reasonably well. Just think about that. And I want you to think about, do you think you should teach it less or teach it differently? And what might the difference be? And go ahead and take 30 seconds to jot your response down in chat. Right. So writing IEPs is something that we are seeing more of. There's the data analysis, teaching it differently. As an English teacher, grammar and mechanics. Great. Yes. So many people naming that things actually need to be taught differently, right? And so it is actually thinking about how we answer this question is really important, right? And so it actually requires knowing what AI can actually do, right, to the skill. And that's what we are going to show you in this framework, right? There are some things like the grammar checking that maybe we teach slightly less of it because it's embedded into so many of these other skills. And we know AI can do that pretty well, actually, without a lot of oversight. But other things like data analysis that we actually need to teach differently, not less of, but thinking about how we integrate AI into the process that we're teaching with students. So now, what I've been talking all about, these four quadrants. We see the two axes. We see automation across the bottom, and then we see augmentation across the vertical axis. And so then we end up with these four quadrants. On the bottom left, we have the anchor. So this is low automation, low augmentation. We call these the kind of anchor skills. These are the, uniquely human skills that AI cannot meaningfully replace. And it's not really going to enhance in any significant way. And so this is something that we want to keep a distinctly human, right? And then the top left, right above that, is the deepen. This means there's low automation, but high augmentation. So this is something that AI cannot do independently, but it will help amplify what we can do with it. So this is thinking about like strategic thinking, some complex problem solving, and like conceptual understanding. Like we need to, as the people, have the conceptual understanding, but AI could help support in building that with us. Then if we shift over to the top right, we're going to have the transform. So this is where we have high automation and high augmentation. And so this is where we actually are changing the way we work because AI can both execute on things really immensely and help augment what we are going to do, right? And so this, I would consider putting research or data analysis into this iterative writing because it is actually changing how we think about doing this work as we move forward. And then the bottom right is the streamline. These are the skills that there is high augmentation and I'm sorry, high automation and low augmentation, right? And so this is AI does this stuff pretty well. And it's not really necessarily making humans necessarily better at it, right? So this is where I would put maybe some routine calculations or grammar checking and whatnot. And so what we noticed, we could place all the skills somewhere on this grid, and some were, further up, further down, and you can get into the methodology in the report. But there was a placement for all of the skills within this. And so what does this look like when we think about kind of a single standard? Maybe let's put it to practice here. So if we think about an ELA standard, which is to write arguments to support claims with clear reasons and relevant evidence. Within that, there's several embedded skills. And you can see those skills kind of going down the middle column there. And what we can see here is how we can think about these skills in these quadrants. So the skill of developing a claim or thesis, that is an anchor skill. It is an intellectual core. It is something that students must form and have a genuine position on, right? So that is a uniquely human thing that we need to kind of anchor. Then we have this evaluating source credibility. That goes into the deepen category because there is an essential need for human judgment in the work that happens for evaluating source credibility, right? And we know that there's limited kind of automation that can happen with that because we need to make sure that there is that human in the loop there. And then the transform part of this kind of standard is the drafting and structuring the argument. This is what we were talking about. There's a new workflow here, right? Students need to be able to direct AI and then focus the energy on shaping and critiquing and knowing when to deploy it. And so that's changing how we might teach that particular skill. And then, as we've been saying, the streamlining is the grammar, mechanics, and citations. It's not that we don't need to know how to do that, but we don't need to maybe spend 3 days talking about MLA formatting because that is something that can be embedded into the deeper research that folks are doing, right? So that's kind of a way to think about this at a kind of standard level. And it's not that like we're asking which standard matters more, it's what skills within those standards do we need to think about differently, and reconfigure how we're spending our time or what we're asking students to do. And so what this means is we also need to think about the teaching, right? And so this is a way to think about, now that we have placed these skills in these different quadrants, what might be the instructional strategies that better support that. And there's a lot of text on this slide, so I will also like just focus in on a couple here. If we look at the transform, which was the drafting and structuring an argument, we might consider these instructional choices here. We have some rhetorical decision making, right? So having students look at two generated outlines for the same claim and determine which might be more useful for different purposes and why we might have those. And so that's kind of more of that kind of critical thinking there. Or AI as a thinking partner to generate the counter argument for a thesis. So those are ways that we can kind of transform the drafting and structuring of an argument instruction. And then when we look at anchor for developing a claim or a thesis, like we continue doing the things that we know work really well, where we have a thesis workshop or Socratic seminars to determine what those are, right? And so you can also see what we would do for deepen and streamline in here. And so there are like, it's not that nothing, what I want to make really clear here is that there is still instruction happening for all these skills. There is something directly from the teacher that we need to kind of provide and support. And then there is student-led kind of work that needs to happen as well. And so we want to make sure that that is continuing. And again, just rethinking a bit of what we do specifically for the different skills that we have in there. And that is kind of the application that we have here. So I'm going to pause because I saw Monica had a question. This also requires students to know how to prompt in a way that ensures they are directing AI. Absolutely, right? And that's part of this transforming process. Like, what does a good prompt mean? And what's really interesting is what a good prompt was 2 years ago is different than what a good prompt is now. And that's going to continue to change because the LLMs are getting much better at putting together a better prompt, even if you have a weaker kind of start point. And so that is also part of the process of learning of where do you need to make sure you've given the right amount of context? Where can you give a little less? Those are kind of the skills that we would want to make sure are included in the learning as well. Wonderful. Okay, so we've talked about kind of what to teach differently in these four quadrants. And now like this how, right? And that is coming down to what you already know as great teachers, right? And that it just comes down to like really good learning science here. And what we want to make sure we highlight coming out of this report and kind of like aligning to it here is we want to think about when students are learning the new content, how we are not lowering the bar, but the load, right? Like what is the cognitive energy we are asking students to put forward and how we're asking to do that. And this is the worked examples, the think alouds, the concept mapping, all of the work that goes into kind of helping students make sense of content. And then we go into the kind of a raised demand, which is once they have this content knowledge, how do we increase the thinking work that students can do with inquiry or design thinking Socratic seminars? And so this is the balancing act here is making sure that there is the right load at the entry level for students and making sure they get to the level of practice that they need to and independent work as well for that. And so we can see these strategies then by quadrant on this slide here, where we can kind of, again, a lot of text. You guys are going to have full access to all of this, so you'll be able to look at it. It's also going to be in the educator guide, so you can look at this. Please do not feel like you need to memorize all of this in one look. You're also welcome to take a screenshot right now. But what you can see in each of these quadrants are suggested strategies that help lower the load and raise the demand aligned to kind of the way AI would play into this as well, right? And so thinking about how you are already using these strategies and what you can do to emphasize them depending on the skills that you are thinking about as well. So I'm going to pause for just a second for you to look at this before I go on to the next slide. Okay, so there's more again, just reorienting, like there's so many different layers to this. And so really trying to like synthesize and parse down into what you all can use. And what I want to highlight here is that in the research we did, we found that 64% of all the skills that we mapped fell into either transform or anchor, which means that this is where these are the kind of skills that we should be focused on for the biggest either instructional shifts or anchoring points that we want. And so we want to like, I think that was a really interesting thing to come out of this, that most of the skills fall under those two. And so really thinking about what it means to transform some of the workflows and ways that we approach certain skills and what we really need to anchor through these kind of modeled think alouds and kind of the experiential learning that needs to happen as well. And so when you think about your content that you're teaching and how to, we can't change everything all at once, but how do you actually focus in on what we need to transform, what skills we need transformational kind of instruction happening, and which skills we want the anchor work happening as well. And so that is kind of the call to you all on this as well, is this there's a place to focus. Um, these next few slides, I'm going to go through quickly again because I just did want to make sure I left enough room for Q&A. And this is some ideas of what this can look like in action for, say, anchor skills, right? And so this, again, are these irreplaceably human skills. And what that could look like in ELA is that there's still kind of, we still have to do close reading of complex texts without AI assistance. That is an important human skill to have because we have to be able to do that. And we probably are going to do more live dialogue. I think that is a really important skill of communication that needs to happen. And that like situates really well in an ELA classroom. So how do we have more of these kind of oral defense style content as a way to really anchor the skills of communication and like sharing ideas in that way, right? And for science, we see that like the need for like continuing to have these hands-on labs is very important because there is going to be a continued need to have this anchor skill of being able to run through the experiments. Now, there's also a lot of augmentation that happens with science as well, but really thinking about how do we make those real-time adaptations as we are seeing results come through for experimentation. And we can see like in the anchor spaces, there's a variety of roles AI can play, all the way from no AI by design. Like we actually don't want AI because there is something fundamental that students need to learn and that needs to be clear to them. Or all the way down to we have transparency on the use of AI for the cognitive friction that we need, right? So being able to name really clearly we're not using AI or we're using it in a limited way here because the act of the learning and that like cognitive work you're doing is the important thing that we need to build. And so this is kind of ways to think about how AI plays into these skills in that anchor quadrant. And then similarly for transform, we have, again, this is our high augmentation, high automation section. And so this is where we can think about how we are assessing in ELA, not just the final draft, but what is the entire process that went in through it to it, or how do we have something beyond just one final written product that we're looking at to help students understand the process changes that are going on now because we have AI as a tool to help with the writing as well, right? And so it's really thinking about not just the end product, but the process. So for those of you who are thinking like assessment is something that's top of mind for me, these are ways of thinking about how we can update what we are asking students to do and how we're asking them to show their learning in this skill or sorry in this quadrant in particular. And similarly, we have the role of AI in these transform skills can vary, right? We have AI generating and student as the editor. We could do comparative output analysis. And we have the bias and limitation log. So these are different ways you can think about integrating AI into the work of these transform skills as well. And so ultimately, what we look at then is in assessment, we are kind of shifting again from product to process, right? How do we actually look at thinking throughout the work and the direction of AI that we are kind of orchestrating behind the scenes? And maybe shifting away from detection. While I know it's something that lots of people are using, like to understand how AI is being used in student work, to design, right? Like where we are thinking about assignments with AI in mind, and so students are being asked to use it in very purposeful ways. And so it is in the design of the work that we're asking students to do, being really explicit and clear with it. And moving away from again a single one output written response as an assessment to something that is more interactive, requires kind of the think alouds or in class time to show what learning, if any, has happened, right? And so this is for those of you who are like assessment. That was the thing I wanted to think about. These are ways that you might think about applying that in your classroom as well. And so it is kind of the way you could think about backwards design in your content. If you're shifting assessment in this way, then what happens with the content of a unit so that you can get students to that place as well. And so what I'd love for you to now think about, I talk far longer than I prefer talking in any of these sessions, but there's so much content and the webinar format is such. But I would love for you to again think about that skill that you teach that AI can now do reasonably well, and think about one thing you assess right now where a student could use AI and you might not be able to tell, and what you could assess instead. So I think, again, going back to this slide and what you were reflecting on earlier in the session, what what would you change about assessment of that skill to actually better understand what students are learning here? And you can just throw that into chat. Love this. Thanks. Mary, I see your question. I'm going to address it in just a minute. I love this, Monica. Before I would have students select the best claim or the best evidence to support a claim. Now that you have them debate that in class, so bringing that into the class so that they can actually discuss, which is great. Danielle, yes, I totally agree. It's like very, very adding like the virtual instruction is a challenging component. And so thinking about the different formats in which you can get student responses that are otherwise normally asynchronous is great. I think that's wonderful. Yeah, love this. The AI is great at generating wrong things, so why not have it do that and ask students like, how would you know if this is right or wrong, and what would you do to address that? Yes, Christy, absolutely right. Like anything text-based, and this is coming up over and over again, we really need to rethink what we're asking students to do and why we're having them do that, right? And in some cases, you might need it to be without any AI, because there's a very specific thing that you are looking for that students need to be able to show. But you have to be clear with that for students, like why they would need to do something without AI. And otherwise, thinking about how are you meaningfully integrating AI use into what students are learning, because quite frankly, like the workforce is going to demand it, right? And that is what we saw in this research, that there is a change in what employees or employers are seeking out in employees, and we want to make sure students are prepared for that as well. And so what we have here is, again, if we think about how we can apply this quadrant framework to the planning work that you all are already doing in your classrooms, is that for our anchor kind of skills, right? We shift from, an asynchronous independent assignment to something that might be live, right? Because it requires human interaction. So that's maybe a way to think about how you rethink the assessments for those kinds of skills. For the deepen, again, it's again, how do we design for the AI use in a really strategic way so that we can show human oversight over it and human critical thinking with it? And for transform, this is really where we think about how do we shift from product to process, right? Because the process is changing for what we do and how we kind of show that work. And then for the streamline, again, how do we build in the mechanical things that we might have assessed on before into kind of the workflow that we're asking students to do in what's been adjusted in Transform as well. And so this, again, I hope it helps you think about how you might apply this in both thinking about assessment and what you're focused on in your classroom. And so the things that I'd love for you to take away, and again, this is going to be this will be in the one pager, which we'll put into the chat now, so you have that. Is there's this lens that you can take. This four-quadrant framework is kind of a helpful diagnostic lens on a standard. Can AI do it? Can AI enhance it? And then what does that mean for instruction, right? And within a standard, the skills within the standard are going to fall in different places. And then there is this shift, like we actually are raising the cognitive bar. And so we really need to think about where do we want to streamline and where do we need to invest in like deepening and transforming skills, right? And then finally the move, right? Like we want to spark for you all. How do you make these small changes in your instruction, whether it's in how you're assessing students, or what kind of strategies you're using to help better highlight what is transforming in the work that students need to do in your classroom as well, right? And so this is, again, like there are big questions, like entire curricula that we want to think about on a larger scale, but individually in your classroom, how can you just think about a single unit, a single standard that you might want to apply this to, and want to help kind of think through a new process based on these skills as well. And so with that, would just love any questions that you have in the chat. And as if you don't have any, that's totally fine. There's some things to consider on the slide as well. And I know I had Mary's question to come back to, so I'm just going to pull that up. Okay, so Mary's question was like, how can we learn and stay abreast with what our students already know? You showing up here is one of these things. I think it is, we are all learning, and there is such a wide range of where people are at. And actually, our CEO just showed the slide of like the entire global population, and less than half the people are using AI of any kind, and less than like 1% are using generative AI. And so it's not that like there's a lot of room for where people are at, and so I think it is just being open to learning and being in these spaces, and a lot of different organizations are putting a lot of free content out there to help with that, and I think advocating for your school and district to prioritize this for the adult learning, I think is really, really important, right? Let's see. And then Kevin, you said assessing the process raises. Yes, 100%, Kevin. I also think AI can help streamline that as well. So I think when we widen what we think about as far as what's possible with assessment and how AI could support in actually making process assessment more feasible, there's a lot to explore there. And I don't know all the answers by any way, but I do think we have some thinking to do on like what does that mean and how do we do it efficiently. And I think AI can be part of the solution for that as well. David, I'm so glad. I firmly believe that anything that is put out there for teachers needs to be highly applicable. And if you're interested in the full report, please read it. It is long. There's a lot in there. But I'm like excited to see how folks are able to take this as well. Davey, you said it's a challenge to assess skills in bigger groups and how they. Yeah, I think there's this. This is the question of like, how do you do this? There are. I think this is the question. Bring that back to your department. Could we use AI in such a way that helps us actually have students do these kinds of interactions? What is the one thing that we want to be seeing live happening? And AI has actually gotten very good at writing rubrics. And so like, do you have a really great rubric that you can use that will actually help speed up the process for yourself? I wouldn't use AI to do the grading, but to help create the criteria that you are using to grading. And so I think that is what I see as like the exciting opportunity. Like, what is your dream for how you could assess this? And maybe there's an AI way solution to help make that happen also. Yeah, Claire, you said should AI literacy become a core competency for every teacher? My personal belief, and I think everyone at aiEDU would say yes, like it is not for specialists to be teaching. It is something that we as adults and educators should be bringing in because it actually influences all aspects of content learning. But what you do and how you do it in an ELA classroom versus a math classroom might be different. And I think that's important to know too, that like there isn't one way that you do this across the board. But I do think if it gets relegated only to specialists teaching about this, that diminishes what I think we're seeing as how fundamentally this is changing like the workforce and what we need to bring and prepare students for as well. Emily, great question. We are building these examples. So we have these ELA ones. I have math and science ones. Could not get through everything. So we have more that we can do. And I think part of this is we love doing this with educators actually, so that we can see like what is the actual application of this as well. So please like reach out and I can share some more of that as well. Nicholas, how will AI instruction help increase student achievement on the NAEP assessment? Good question. I think it is, we are trying to think about really here what matters most for learning, right? And ideally, you see that translated through kind of the standardized assessments that we have out there. I do think there's probably an evolution to standardized assessment that needs to happen as well. That is a much bigger question and a much larger like can of worms to open. But the idea here is that we're actually thinking about how do we deepen students' core content knowledge and leverage AI literacy as a way of helping do that, right? And it is a pathway to both like AI tools can help make the content more accessible, and then thinking about the applications of content and the world around us could be really powerful. As a math teacher, like one of the examples that I think like is really powerful is understanding understanding similarity and geometric kind of similarity is like a foundational part of how AI models generate images. Now, of course, the AI models do this at like a quite wide, like a much wider scale, but I think that would make teaching similarity and geometric transformations potentially more interesting, right? And so, how can you think about bringing application to content area that's relevant from AI as well? Christy, AI will never be able to replace teachers, and like I will shout that from the from the rooftops. Although I think Christy, are you signed? Is that Azim signed on as Christy? But yeah, like teachers are more essential than ever because we need people at the center of what students are experiencing at schools, and that is not changing. And I think it's actually more important that we have great teachers in classrooms to direct how this technology is coming to students, right? Okay, I think I might have got to everything. Did I miss anything? I'm trying to like go through chat very quickly. I think we did it, and we did it in the 45 minutes. I just want to say thank you so much. I have there's a feedback survey which I'll put into chat now, but I know many of you are kind of at the end of your day. This will also be a part of what's sent out on Monday, along with all the resources and everything. But we love hearing from people, and we keep improving our content based on what we hear back from you as well. Andrea, I'll pass it back over to you, and I can stop sharing as well.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Such great information shared and loved seeing all the buzz in the chat. Make sure you grab that link to take the survey from aiEDU. And before you log out, we do ask that you just respond to our quick one question poll for the National AI Literacy Day team, just ranking 1 to 5. How did your knowledge of AI improve after listening to this session? This will help us in planning for next year's events. As you are filling out that pop-up on your screen, we just want to thank you for your time today. Be sure to follow along with AI Literacy Day. We really want that resource hub to be a year-round hub for AI literacy. So you can use the resources there, not just today, but any day. And keep following along for us to start promoting next year's event. Thank you all so much.